Good morning, everybody. Afternoon. It's 2:07 p.m. on the 14th of February. It is Valentine's Day, so I wanted to quick give a shout out to everybody and wish them a happy Valentine's Day. And hopefully you'll find this of some use. It's going to be a little off topic today, um, but I think it's important. The topic today that I picked was food preparedness, because if we don't have the right types of food and stuff, we could actually get sick, which could turn into a medical uh, emergency, which could affect you. So I figured I'd talk about that a little bit and some things like that. So hopefully you'll find this of interest. So we'll see how it goes and go from there. So one of the biggest things you always hear is people saying during an incident, they needed food, I'll just go out and hunt for it, or I'll fish for my food. So I thought about that, and part of the thing I've been working on, that I haven't been doing a lot of videos, is I'm working on a threat matrix for my area. I know it's not a bad area just because of numbers where I'm at and stuff, but I wanted to go through and run some numbers. But picture in the county I live, there is, as of 2017, 142,000 people in the county where I live. And God only knows how many would be out hunting, but when you go out hunting and fishing with that many people demanding the same resource, those resources are going to be limited. So hunting and fishing may not be all that. So that's something you got to think about when you're out there. And then I thought about it, and you look at it and you think, like all your stores in your area, like your big box stores, Walmart, Dollar General, and stuff. How many times do they get shipments in a week with food, and to keep their stores stocked? And a lot of it, when you figure it out, it's probably 2 to 3 times a week. And just in my little town, the town I live in, we only have 900, approximately 900 residents. It might even be less than that. Our dollar store, that's 3 times a week. That's a lot of delivery for stuff that they bring in. Now, I don't know what the exact number is. I'm just saying, based off of the national standard of most stores only have 72 hours of food. But that doesn't take into consideration fast food and restaurants, and how many people nowadays go out to these restaurants and eat. And they're not shopping, but they're eating. How many people go grocery shopping once a month? I know I don't. Years ago I used to. I used to be able to keep it stocked that well. But a lot has changed. We're more demanding on foods that need to be restocked more often. Foods that die off very quickly, your milk, your breads, stuff like that. Normally we go maybe once a week, and that's only for necessity items a lot of time. Normally we do big shopping every 2 weeks. Could I survive without going grocery shopping? Would be probably pretty tough on some stuff. I think I could go probably short term, a week to maybe 2 weeks. It's hard to say because our freezer's getting a little low right now because we're at the in between of butcher season. But that's things to look at. And how many people go multiple times a week shopping? That's things you got to consider is what happens if you can't. Disasters, gas prices go up, which affect the food deliveries, power outages, trucker strikes. and people forget, I don't know how large of an event it was because I was a little kid back then, but in 1974, there was a trucker strike that affected uh, Pennsylvania, and they actually had a um, proclamation of a disaster. I think it was, I gotta look it up now. It was a more of a local event, but that was in 1974 that we had the trucker strike that affected stuff in Pennsylvania. So that's things to think about. And if it's a disaster and it affects a large area and there's no power, the food in the stores are going to be spoiled in 72 hours, and the looting for food's going to take place within 24 hours. You're going to have people looking for food, looking for water. Um, and the bad part is the crimes. People break into stores not looking always for food. They're going to break into the liquor stores. They're going to break into um, your other places of high-end products, sneakers, TVs. What they're going to do with the stuff, who knows? Because the power is out. It ain't going to help them. But that's things we need to look at. So some of the things I thought about was the caloric or calories per day to maintain life, and the USDA says roughly 2,000 calories a day. Um, but when you look at the actual intake of what people are eating, is much higher than that. It's between 3,500 and 4,000 calories a day is what some people are eating. That's why our obesity scale is so high. And then look at what you're bringing in and intaking with your food. What do you need to, how much do we really need? And the products that it falls down to is carbs, proteins, fats, and water. And to make you lose weight, you got to remember we need low calories, high protein, low fat, and high water intake. But in realistic terms, we are eating high carbs, low protein, high fat, and low water intake. So when you look at food, you got to think about how it's going to affect you and the nutritional value of that food. You know, um, People say, well, I can do this, that, and everything else. And you got to think about it and how you're going to do that. Some people say, well, a value food would be lettuce, but it's not. Lettuce is not a good value. Um, but what you got to look at would be your sprouts, your nuts, fats, you know, um, because you need the fat intake. Meats, vegetables, grains are your big ones. And when you look at those items, can we grow them? And a lot of it we can. So you want to look at that, if you're going to do a garden. And we'll talk about that in a second. A garden's not going to be an easy thing to do in a matter of a week. Maybe some sprouts you can grow, but some of this other stuff's going to take time. So some other things you got to think about when you're dealing with disasters and stress is comfort foods. Your chocolate, peanut butter, Twinkies, whatever else you have, you may need some of that for comfort food because it makes you feel a little better when times are rough, but you may need it to help you. Some of them foods don't have an issue with expiration, but sometimes they may have an issue. And if you're going to garden, how much of a grow season do you have to put those seeds in and get them to grow? A lot of people forget that. On your short stuff, you may get 2 months and it starts to grow, but long-term stuff may take up to 4 months when you garden. And how good is your soil? There's a learning curve when you get into gardening and having food that'll work. So I think that's part of some of the things we need to look at. And the other thing is, if you're buying seeds, making sure it falls within the mature date of the number of days for your growth season. You want it to come up less. You don't want it to say a mature date of 240 days and your growth season is only 120. So you got to think about that when you're out there. And we need to look at doing that gardening now to allow our bodies to adjust. Whatever you grow and you're going to eat, make sure your body's used to it. Because if not, when you switch and that demand changes, during a disaster, and now you need 4,000 calories, because people forget about that. During a disaster, your calorie requirements are going to go through the roof. That's going to be a tough one to think about, where stress is going to increase, your workload's going to increase, because you may not always have the advantages of everything else. So we're going to have an increase in carbs, protein, fats, and H2O, which is water. So you want to look at that. And if we switch our foods from the normal stuff to emergency supplies, we may get sick with diarrhea, gas, upset stomach. And once you get sick, what happens? Think about it. You can't work. You're not able to get up and get stuff. It keeps on getting worse. You're not going to thrive. You may wind up where you actually die from being sick because you can't get the intakes that you need. So you want to be ready for that. And one of the things they teach is store what you eat. They talk about it on PrepRx a lot, about storing what you eat. So that's also important. Remember, when you look at food storage, short-term versus long-term. Short-term could be 2-3 years, where long-term could be 15+ years. So, picture some of the stuff we would lose without power or would be considered short-term, which would be your milk, your produce, your canned food, freezer foods, bread, oils and fats, Crisco, instant meals, fast foods, stuff like that. That we would be looking at, but can go bad. But then when we look at long-term food, think about how the requirements for it would be your low O2, which would be oxygen absorbers or replacing the oxygen out. Coolness would be your root cellars or basements. You can also remember, how did they store ice many, many years ago? Is they would pack it with sawdust. Dry and wet products, keeping them dark. Containers, not allowing your UV lights in them. What you can do is actually take whatever the product is and take a flashlight and try to shine it through it. If the flashlight comes through the product, then your food's being spoiled by light. And solid versus liquid. And another big threat is animals. Your rodents, mice, rats. Think about rats. How many people are aware a rat can chew through 1.5 feet of concrete? Because their teeth are always, they'll fall out, they'll replace them. Can they go through what you have them stored in? You want to be careful of that. And then how are you going to cook your food safely? Do you have a wood-burning stove? Do you have a fireplace? Do you have solar access? Do you have a propane gas grill? Or one of those little gas grills with the 1-pound cylinders? Do you have a generator? Do you have coal or charcoal that you can cook on? That's the things we got to think about. And do you have your own way of producing food, like your meats? How are you going to grow it? Prepper X brought it up, but if you're going to use rabbits, yes, rabbits are high in protein. Probably, I think it's almost 30% protein, but they have no fat. So you're going to have chickens or goats to supplement the fat. You're going to have to eat, the eggs with it to give you the fat that you need, or you're going to get sick from it, from not having it. So that's things to think about, you know. And how else can you cook during a disaster? Well, think about it. Could you leave the food in the vehicle and let it cook in the window, let it cook on the motor of the vehicle to help warm it, thaw it, defrost it, whatever you want to call it, so that it can try to heat the product. So I thought that was important to bring up because most people don't think about that. And it's something I think you need to think about. Being prepared more for it than anything else. So having a food source is key. Making sure you eat, what you store. And remember, how much energy are you going to burn to make your meal? Because you're going to burn calories to produce that food. You're going to burn calories to cut firewood. You're going to burn calories to go hunting and fishing. So that's things you need to think about and put into a plan. Part of my plan that I was working on today is breaking down the county, the crime, the population for my state, the hazard threats that the emergency management thought about, president disasters that we've had in PA, along with the crime rates, population decline. And believe it or not, you may be surprised on where their numbers are and what the threat matrix is. So I'm working on that because I think part of the solution is coming up with your threats and can we mitigate any of them? Or do we need to have that plan that we can't bug in, we need to get out? And some of this is going to come down to that, and some of the other stuff we're okay with. So I tell people, it's things you got to look at. So, just figured I'd run that by you a little bit. Make sure everybody's, have their ducks in a row. Start planning for whatever, because we're already, going into the month, the middle of the month already, and having a plan is going to be key for your garden. How are you going to plant? What are you going to plant with? How to limit your weeds? Are you worried about weeds? Because believe it or not, sometimes weeds are not bad in the garden. Sometimes I do stronger gardens when I let the weeds go. So it's things you need to think about and stuff when you're out there. So come up with your plans and make sure you discuss them with your family. So that's it for today. I'm going to get off here just because people will hate me if I talk too long. It's been about 20 minutes, so I'll get off here. Y'all have a good day. Until my next video, be safe. God bless.